Welcome to Channel 24. I'm Nataliia Lutsenko, and I'm welcoming Michael Sheitelman, political analyst. Michael, good evening.
Good evening, Natalia.
Michael, Sergey Lavrov, just a few hours before the peace talks started with the Ukrainian and American delegation, he said that he's rejecting peace terms without Russian gains in Ukraine. And I was thinking, is that a real confidence? Because maybe a year ago, I would think that it's a real confidence of a foreign minister of Russia to say so. But now it seems like, I don't know, I just want to hear your perspective, but it seems like it's the language of a country that cannot win, but rejects the idea of losing and cannot admit it.
Yeah, exactly. And we could make a look backward, and we could say that the same rhetoric it is during the last year approximately, and the last change in negotiation positions was in March 2025. So it is 11 months ago, the last change in positions. Then Ukraine agreed to freeze the conflict on the current front line. Before that, the claim of Ukraine was withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian territory. Now Ukraine is ready to freeze the conflict on the current front line. But this change happened 11 months ago. And what is changed in Russian position during last 11 months? Zero, just zero, nothing. None changes of Russian position. So it doesn't look like negotiation. It doesn't look like, it looks like negotiation, but it doesn't look like compromise because Russia never agreed to any compromise. More than that, each month they want more and more and more, like something about nuclear weapon or some another strange ideas of Russian propaganda. But yeah, and it is very, we don't hear it, we don't see any basement after the words of President Trump that Putin wants a peace. If Putin wants peace, it means that when Ukraine make a pace towards Russia, so Russia should make a pace towards Ukraine. But we never heard about just any pace. And yes, you described it absolutely exactly. The situation, the current situation in February. We are now in the almost last days of February. And what happens? All previous months, Russia gained some territories, occupied some new territories. But in February, we don't have the final result, but it looks like Ukraine regained part of territories. So this is Ukraine in attack. This is Ukraine free its own territory and not Russia occupying new territories. So now Ukraine has more reasons to ask territories from Russians than Russia from Ukrainians.
Absolutely. And it's very contradicts with this words of Lavrov and their messages at all, because um, on 24th of February, a lot of media around the world made a lot of their investigations and just reports about Russia's war anniversary in Ukraine. And they were all saying that the pace of this war and of Russian attack has super extremely dramatically slowed down. So everybody is telling the truth, to be honest. Well, it's still regarding the battlefield. Maybe economically, Russia is not that bad as we would love to see it. But still, a lot of Western media, I've seen a lot of videos and articles, they're all analyzing battlefield. And right, as you said, that Ukraine is regaining territory at Zaporizhia direction, for instance.
Also, the speed with Russia went forward, it was also very very slow last couple of years. We are going forward, yeah, but in with this, if we keep this pace, so it will take them about 1,000 year to occupy Ukrainian territory, all the Ukraine. 1,000 year, not 100 year, not 10 years, but 1,000 year. It is in the if we compare to the 2025 here, not today. In today's space, we are occupying Russian territory in 1 million year, obviously. Yeah, but also we could mention the economical situation, and also during this anniversary, A lot of people, they analyzed what happens in Russia from the economical point of view, and this is not some speculation because now it is very obvious. For just couple of examples, the budgets, local budgets, they have the federal budget and local budgets. And about federal budget of Russian Federation, we heard a lot that they have a huge deficit now, etc., etc. But it appeared that during last year, the deficit of local budgets, budgets of regions, we have 83 regions in Russian Federation, like 83 states, tripled during last year. Tripled. The deficit is tripled during last year. So we don't have a money in local level, not only on federal level. And this is very, very important. And when we compare, for example, the revenues from oil and gas, it cut down by 40% during last year. So they are in very, very bad situation. And the reason why we now lose on also on front line, it is also the budget problem because they can't mobilize more people from the regions. The regions, they don't pay money. We don't have money to pay to the recruits, and they can't find new recruits. This is the new reality of Russians. This is the first time during the war when they can't pay to the new recruits. They just don't have any money for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here. This stream room doesn't like me and I doesn't like it. So it's just mutual. Yeah, so also I was reading while the negotiation process was happening today, Bloomberg saying that Putin now faces a dilemma that prolong the war and risk further strain, or cut a deal and save a face. So, from your perspective, which path looks more likely for him at this stage? But I can predict the answer, to be honest.
I know both answers, they have some possibilities, some reasons. Because if Putin now sees any possibility to continue the war, he will continue the war. But it is not so obvious that he sees this possibility. First, budget problem, oil import problem, inner political situation in Russian Federation itself. By the way, this year at the autumn they have a election. This is a so-called election, obviously. This is not the real election to the parliament, but it just look like so-called election. It is faked. Yeah, we know who will win this election, which party. This is Mr. Putin's party, United Russia. Yes, but Russia is very, very corrupt state, and the place in parliament, they usually sell it for the money for rich people. Inside the ruling party, United Russia, they sell the place in the list of participants of the parliament, and each position in parliament costs millions of dollars. And these people who pay that, they want this money back. So we want it back from the budgets. They invest. For example, some person invested $5 million, $10 million to be a parliament member in the Russian Federation. So this person wants to return this money from when they steal something from the budget. But they don't have anything to steal because they don't have money in budget. So this is, the point of instability. This election is not a real election, obviously, but it is point of instability to the system, to this corrupted system. It is also very interesting. So, like President Trump wants to stop this war before the election in November. So maybe, in theory, I don't know because I am not part of Putin's cabinet, but it is also the option that he wants to stop the war before the election to the Russian parliament in September or October.
Well, that's an interesting scoop, I would say.
Yeah.
Something new, Michael, something new.
Yeah, nobody cares about, because nobody cares about this election because everybody knows who will the winner.
The result, yeah.
Result. But when we say, for example, okay, the ruling party, United Russia, they collected 85% of vote on federal vote, or 90% of vote. This is federal vote, 90% of vote. But this is 450 or something like that, the real people who are the members of parliament, and all of them, they are rich people. Or they pay for this place, or somebody pay for them for this place. This is not for free. This is not without money. All of this is the huge business on the state money.
Absolutely. And Michael, Moscow was hit by a drone swarm just a few hours ago. 100 drones were flying to Russian capital. Ukrainian drones, obviously. It's for the third time during the last 2 months it's happening that such a massive attack to Russian cities and to Moscow, and the airspace were closed, and the main major airports like Domodedovo, Vnukovo, Sheremetyevo, they were also temporarily closed. So my question to you: to what extent, you know, this repeated penetration of Moscow's and Russian airspace undermine the Kremlin's narrative that the war is somewhere far away, not in Moscow, and that, Russian land is untouchable and safe. I mean, the capital.
I'm sorry to say, but all of these attacks on Russian territory, it is not about narratives and not for the narratives. This is for the real success on the front line. It is very, very connected to very, very connected things. Let's take today's attack on Moscow city. This is called disturbing attack usually, and we know that de facto maybe 1 or 2 or 0 drones could penetrate to the center of Moscow itself, but all the counter missile system of Russians work. They all concentrated around Moscow and St. Petersburg now, and they don't have. They have a very limited number of counter missile systems. Russian, I mean, they don't have enough systems like that, and if they organize such a huge air defense system around Moscow and around St. Petersburg, they don't have the counter missiles rockets to another parts of Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm.
Russian Federation, it is the huge territory, and in this case, it is disadvantage, not an advantage, because we could send our drones and rockets to any place, to Ural or to Siberia or to the north or to the south, and they don't know where to predict our missiles and our drones. And when they put all their air defense systems on Moscow and St. Petersburg, they lack air defense systems on another cities. And during just a couple of weeks, Ukraine organized, let's say, 3 or 4 big attacks on arsenals and on producers, on manufacturers of the weapon, on manufacturers of missiles, for example, ballistic missiles, and on oil refineries. And why these attacks is so successful? Because all the counter air defense system, they stand around Moscow and St. Petersburg. The same in front line. They could bring this counter air defense system to the front line, Russians, but they need to protect Moscow. So they don't protect their own forces on front line. They protect Moscow. Here in Ukraine, we are very compacted, and our air defense system works simultaneously to defend city and the front line, because we have 100 kilometers between city and front line, sometimes 30 kilometers, like in Zaporizhzhia, for example. In Russia, we have 1,000 kilometers between city and front line, and you just can't defend all of this territory. So this is military tactic and military strategy, not only narrative. And speaking about narratives, yes, for Russians it is very important to protect Moscow itself. I remember the bad times of Russian Federation. It was when we just started our attacks on Moscow city. It was 2023, summer 2023. There was very interesting indicator in Russia, inside Russia. I follow Russian sport and Russian football and Russian sports sites. And what happened? That foreign football players, they asked, who played mostly in Moscow football clubs, they asked to sell them to another clubs, to St. Petersburg and another clubs, because in Moscow it was very unsafe. Because every day we had an attack on the city center of Moscow, and all of them were foreigners. So we live in one, really in one district, in city center, in like in downtown of Moscow, and all the attacks every day was on downtown of Moscow. So they decided, foreign people in Moscow, they decided that this is the most dangerous place in the world, the city center of Moscow. So uh, Putin had to do something with that, with this image of Moscow as a dangerous city. So now we really surrounded Moscow with three circles of air defense system, and it works. But they spent all of their rockets and all of their efforts on that, and this is the reason why we attack exactly Moscow and not anything else.
Okay. I lost you for a second. Okay, I'm here. Yeah. Speaking about rockets, actually, this night was kind of a hard in Kyiv, but the number of rockets flying is comparatively to years before. I mean, the difference is obvious. It's super low. Thanks God.
Russian rockets, yeah.
Yeah.
When we compare the cruise missiles, so yes, in 2022, Russia used in one attack between 100 till 200 missiles, cruise missiles. Now it was 24. Okay, of different kind, it was 27 cruise missiles of different kind. But all of them, they shut down by our air defense system. All of cruise missiles during last night. And the same result was in the previous Russian attack 1 week ago. All the cruise missiles, they are shut down. It means that our air defense system is, comparing to the previous years, is better and better. But Russians uses more ballistic missiles. They understood that cruise missiles doesn't work. Cruise missiles is very expensive. One missile could cost about $10 million, and it is absolutely with zero efficiency, just zero efficiency during last two attacks. And about ballistic missiles, 3 years ago we used 3, 4, 5 ballistic missiles per night. That's all they had. Last night we used about dozen of these ballistic missiles, and it is more difficult to stop them because only Patriot system could stop ballistic missiles. But generally, yes, this is all of their products. At the beginning of the war, they used missiles, and also it is also about battlefield tanks and artillery, everything. It was Soviet produced but by Soviet people in Soviet times, from the huge storages of Soviet weapon. Now they spent all the Soviet legacy, all the Soviet weapon, all the Soviet missiles, and now we have just new produced missiles. It is also very important when we compare Russian military budget. Okay, this year, for example, the military budget of Russia will be the same like previous year and like in 2024. But in 2024, we had $140 billion of military budget, plus a lot of weapon and ammunition from the Soviet era. And now we have only this $140 billion. So each rocket, each missile, each drone, we should produce and pay for that. So de facto, then when we compare physical objects and number of physical objects, so it declined.
Well, actually, that's a good news. Yeah, that's a good news that they will spend much more money for weapon right now. Um, Michael, my question now regarding the game that Prime Minister of Hungary is playing right now, a political game, because he has frozen a huge military loan to Ukraine. It's 90 billion euros. It's not all of it is military aid. It's got like around 60 billion is military aid and 30 it's humanitarian. But and he is accusing Kyiv of hostility because of Druzhba pipeline. And what political game right now is evolving around Orban, and how he can use this, Ukraine-Hungary conflict in his presidential elections that are coming this year in April, I guess. In April, yes.
That is parliamentary election, but
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, parliamentary. I said presidentially. Parliamentary elections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, he uses that as a populist party. He decided to use the conflict between Hungary and Ukraine and to organize this conflict de facto for winning this election. Now, as far as I know, in pre-election polls, his party loses to the opposition party of Mr. Madjar, and Mr. Orban, Prime Minister Orban, and his party, they changed the electoral system for their use, yeah, and now it works against them because in this, this is very long story, and I am not so deep inside, but it looks like in case that the ratings they are true, like now the gap between these two parties is about 10%. But when you have by this electoral system 10% gap in popular vote, in the places in parliament, you will have the gap of let's say 70% against 30%. 10% gap here in votes, it bring like 40% gap, 40% gap in parliament members. They know it is like in United States, for example, you could gain less popular votes but become president. Yeah, so the same in Hungary now in Hungarian parliamentary elections. So they are now in very difficult situation before this election. Yeah, and they try to gain more votes for this, let's say, to mobilize electorate against Ukraine. Yeah, but uh, it we shouldn't care about the election inside Hungary. It is Hungarian people, and they will choose their parliament and their uh, government, etc. Our care is about this 90 billion, and our care is about our relationship with European Union. What my belief here is that this is not our war. We have a war against Russian Federation, and the war against Hungary is the war of European Commission, of Ursula von der Leyen, of Mr. Costa, and they do that. You know, when Ursula von der Leyen she came to Kiev for the anniversary just a couple of days ago, she said, anyway, we will organize this money with 90 billion to
Yeah.
finance Ukraine, finance Ukrainian war. And our previous experience, uh, you know, our previous experience show us that she's right. Because during the war, 4 years, Mr. Orban started a lot of pro-Putin, pro-Kremlin initiatives inside European Union. For example, he wanted to not to prolong sanctions against Russian Federation. It was just, it was not more than 1 year ago. It was when the Chancellor of Germany was Mr. Scholz. And Mr. Scholz organized somehow that at the moment of voting in summit of European leaders, Mr. Orban went to prepare coffee and did not participate in this voting. Well, it happened in reality, yeah. So I believe that European leaders they have a lot of tools to put the pressure on Hungary. Hungary is recipient of European aid, and they have a lot of instruments just to change the opinion of Mr. Orban. And the last news which I read in European press today about this conflict is that Europeans now were searching for how you said about Mr. Putin to save the face, yeah, some exit from this conflict to Orban to save the face and to say, yeah, I am the winner of this conflict against Zelensky and Ukraine. So they are now in the search for the good formula which will make Orban as a winner or in this situation, but to bring money to Ukraine. So here it is the front line, which is not exactly our front line.
We were discussing before, Michael, that Ukraine are not so lucky with its neighbors. and lots of countries around us using the situation, the Russia's war in their campaigns. It was in Poland with Nawrocki, and now we see it with Orban. And I saw the banner in Budapest with Zelensky and Ursula von der Leyen on the same on at one page. I think you saw it, like they all against Hungary, Brussels with Kiev. It's such a nonsense, to be honest. But yeah,
Natalia, just a second. First, in each country, when you come before election to each country of European Union, you will find a lot of anti-European parties just in each country. Eurosceptical, Euro something against Euro,
okay.
etc. In each country. It depends. In different countries, they are more popular or less popular. Yeah, but this is just the standard political positioning. Second, about Mr. Nawrocki, president of Poland. Then the campaign was in its heydays. So a lot of my viewers, for example, they wrote me letters that what will happen in Poland if Nawrocki will become the president. And I said, no, just a second. Mr. Nawrocki is absolutely anti-Russian politician, absolutely anti-Kremlin, anti-Putin, and anti-Russian, 100%.
Now I see that.
He has a problem with Ukrainian history and the history of Ukrainian-Poland relationship. Yes, he has this problem, but each president will have some when this problem between Poland and Russia. So our care should be that pro-Russian candidates will not win in European countries, and not the like Mr. Nawrocki, now our big friend, I believe. Mr. Nawrocki helped to Ukraine, and you could read, for example, his speech on the anniversary of this war. It was absolutely pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian speech. So I believe that our care is not to stop all the pro-Russian candidates and not the candidates who support and put in the like make Poland great again, for example. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing the West is kind of in a different through the different loop. And I just before our interview, Michael, I was watching the interview of Olaf Scholz, the former Chancellor of Germany. And when you're not on the position, you can speak freely. And he was talking to the Rastis Politik project. It's super nice. And the main goal, no, the main message he was delivering to the audience, that a lot of Western partners deeply understood that Russia was not attacking Ukraine because of the reason of the NATO. Because Putin and Scholz told the journalist that he told Putin, and Putin definitely knew that Ukraine are not going to be a NATO member in a visible future. And he knew it from 2020, something like that. So, but that's very interesting that he's openly talking. You just
But
mentioned.
this narrative is popular in different states. And I remember during our war, I was in South Korea, and I had a conversation with one guy who is historical. He
Historian.
a
Uh-huh.
science historian of the wars, yeah, generally
Yeah.
of wars, not our war.
Yeah.
And he understood that I'm from Ukraine. He asked me a lot about our war, and on some point, he stopped me and said, well, just a second. What do you say? That they want to occupy your territory? I said, yeah, obviously. No, 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 no. But this war about NATO, not about territory. So this is in South Korea, And I asked, but how do you know? If you will read the press of South Korea, all this press just about the NATO problem. So all this war is just about membership of NATO, or will Ukraine be member of NATO or not, and not about territories. He never heard about the occupation of territories. This is very interesting. So Russians, they successfully sell these ideas all around the world, I believe.
Yeah, actually, just finishing our conversation, a few days ago, Ursula von der Leyen, she was visiting Zelensky, but at another venue, hotel of Ukraine. There was a Yes conference organized by Viktor Pinchuk Foundation, and I'm as always there. And there was a Christia Freeland, and she was speaking at the Boris Johnson panel discussion, and she said. And it actually very disappointed me that she said at the beginning of full-scale invasion, the global South countries was a huge disappointment to her. That's her words, not mine. That they deeply do not understand the roots and cause of this war. They think it's something about the United States and Russia rather than Ukraine and Russia. And like we just lost them. Well, she was speaking about Brazil more particularly, but still, I'm not surprised that.
Well, I could bring the more closer example for me. For example, in Israel, I have a Israel citizenship, and I visit Israel each year, and during the war also. And when I had conversations with Israeli people who does not speak Russian, so this is the Israeli people who does not read any Russian propaganda or any Russian messages from Russian language, they don't know a lot about our war. By the way, all of them supports Ukraine. All of them supports Ukraine because the Russia started this war, but they don't know just anything about the war. And now when I come to Israel, so on the border control, they ask me, "Oh, you're from Ukraine, so the war is continuous, so stopped." This is the most popular question. So we don't know why, and I ask them why. Because we have our own problems. We have our war in Iran, with Iran. We have a war with Hamas, and we live in the Middle Asia, and you have some Europeans problem. This is the war between some European countries, they say. Yeah, so this is not our war. So I could understand them. Then our war just started. So do you remember which war was the hottest war before our? I mean, January and February 2022, which war was in the biggest war in the globe at this moment before our war? Do you remember or not?
Maybe I'm mistaken, but it could be Syria.
No, in Syria it was just a civil war in
Oh yeah,
very.
that was the civil war.
No, it was not hot. I mean, the hot stage of in the world.
Next to Russia, something.
No. It is very complicated question. Obviously, yeah. I brought it.
Africa?
Yeah, I brought it just as an example why
Africa.
we never cared about. Africa is very great place with 60 different countries. So it was the war between Ethiopia and Tigray. Ethiopia and Tigray. And Ukrainian people never cared about Ethiopia and Tigray. And if you were asked on the street, do you support Ethiopia or Tigray in this conflict? Nobody had any answer. So the same in Brazil. In Brazil, Russia and Ukraine, it is, I will bring also one more funny fact. When I was in Cuba, it was before our war, I mean. And at this time I lived in Latvia. And in Cuba, as you know, it is Spanish language. And in Spanish, Latvia and Lithuania, very same. Letonia and Lithuania. So it is almost the same name, Letonia and Lithuania. And when people asked me where I'm from, and I said Lithuania, so they didn't know. I said I'm from Europe because Europe. But one guy he insisted, but from what country? I said Latvia. Oh, Lithuania. Oh, you know Lithuania? Yes, I know. I know all of your cities. What country you could know? What kind of cities you know? I know Riga, Daugavpils, Ventspils, Liepaja, Dobele, Sigulda, Kuldiga. I heard that this was one guy who worked on cigar factory, really worker in cigar factory. I said, how do you know that? And
He's smart, yeah.
yeah, he just drawn me the map of Latvia with all
Well,
of this.
that's extreme.
Why? No, but why? I ask why. Because I'm football fan and I know each country by football clubs. So this is the table of Premier League of Latvia. 8 clubs, 8 cities. That's it.
Well, you're right. I understand that. Well, even people in the Western Ukraine since 2014, they were, and even now, some of them are living just a peaceful life, which is good. Which is good. I'm happy that we have some, peaceful corner in
Yeah,
Ukraine.
yeah, yeah. I know.
Michael, it was amazing conversation, an interview, and thank you so much. And I wish you a good evening and see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Bye.